Hello, welcome, welcome. Tonight we will be having a student panel about health journeys, and so it's going to be really like a Q&A. Gary Martinez in the back has done a great job of putting this all together, as well as the Career Center, so a big thank you to Chris for doing the Zoom and all of the additional stuff for the microphones, and Stephanie Bird and Rachel here also. And I'd also like to thank Dr. Haney, who is our pre-health advisor. I'm sure a lot of you all have worked with her. And just to introduce myself, so my name is Bethany Campbell. I'm an academic advisor in University College. I work primarily with the HPEX population. I've been out, and Gary was gracious enough to take over. So we're so excited to have you here. Thank you. A big shout out to all of our panelists for being here this evening. We have one that couldn't make it tonight, Daniel, so we will miss him. But just a quick overview. So a lot of you submitted some questions through a Google Doc, and so I'm just going to be moderating throughout this panel and asking a lot of those questions because some of them are similar, and trying to condense them for sake of time. So we'll just kind of go through those and leave some time at the end if you have additional questions for our panelists. But let's just give a huge round of applause for all of our panelists, please. Yes. And so just to introduce them, for sake of time, we have Sixella in the front. Major or pre-health track, I shouldn't say pre because most of you are applying right now. Physical therapy, undergrad major was exercise science with a minor in public health. Then we have Caitlin, who's doing the physical therapy track, majored in exercise science. Sarah, physician assistant track. Your major was also exercise science, so we're so happy to have all three of you here. And then in the back we have Jada, who physician assistant and majored in exercise science, and then Jenna, who majored in chemistry and is pre-med track. So again, a huge thank you to all of you. So I just want to start, and we'll kind of just go around. Do you think that we should allow all five to answer, or do like three?
Whatever feels comfortable.
Okay, so we'll just kind of see how time goes. But one of the first questions, this came up a lot, is what should I do as a freshman to prepare for medical school or pre-professional school, or just best advice for students that aren't freshmen for undergrad students? What is kind of like your best advice?
I guess I'll go first. I like to plan things out. So my freshman year, I just wrote out like all the prereqs that I need and like all the requirements, and I just put it in a binder. And so as time went off, I went to like checking off things because it can be a little overwhelming as a freshman as well because you're still like new to things. So I like recommend getting a checklist, and like it's okay if you don't get them all done all at once. That's why you have 4 years to like complete it. That's why you can take a gap year. Just it makes it a little easier, and it feels better when you can like check something off.
Yeah, I was about to say I kind of did the same thing of just like my freshman year. I made like a spreadsheet of the schools I wanted to apply to and what their prereqs were, and I just kind of followed that throughout my 4 years of like planning out classes and whatnot.
I would say getting involved, like going into freshman year with an open mind of knowing that you're going to join clubs and having volunteer opportunities, and like knowing that you kind of have to put away time to like do all of these different things so you have a well-rounded application when it's time to apply.
Okay. I would say figure out how you're going to start with your clinical hours, because I feel like that was something that people did on the back end. So for freshmen, I would say figure out what your clinical hours would be. It's something that you could do while in school, and it'd be feasible for you to, get transportation to, and also be able to maintain a job and school.
I would say try to get like as much experience in the field. As like a freshman, you're still really young. That might not even be what you want to do. So I think, really seeing the good, the bad, the ugly that's like within the field will really, you know, maybe it's not what you want to do, and that can allow you time to change your path. But just be open and get as much exposure to different things so you can be certain and then go from there.
Thank you so much. Jada, do you mind, how many hours did you have? Since you brought up clinical hours, I just want to give them an idea, like, as a physician assistant, like, applying, how many hours did you have?
Yeah, so I started my CNA license during my sophomore year summer of sophomore year. So I'm still doing them. I have now around like maybe 6,000, 5,000 to 6,000.
Thank you for that perspective. Okay, so the second question is, what are some obstacles or roadblocks you faced, and how did you overcome them?
Oh, I'll go first again. So I had some like personal family issues my second year of college, and it was towards like final season, so that like pushed me back a little bit. I still like ended up getting good grades and stuff, but like mentally I was like kind of drained. I'm also graduating a year early, so it was like all that stress and just making sure like I graduated on time, like a year early for me. It was like a lot to go through, and I was taking like 18 credit hours, and I was like pushing myself and stressing myself, and I didn't take into account my mental health, so that was a big obstacle to overcome. But like now that I'm in like my senior year, I prioritize that. I make sure like I take time for myself and like self-care and all that.
I'd say my biggest obstacle was trying to find places to shadow to get like physical therapy hours, especially during COVID. That was pretty difficult. So I was luckily just kind of persistent with emailing like lots of different places to shadow, and I was able to find like one place that would allow me to shadow during the summer. So I think my biggest advice with trying to find places to shadow is just like email as many people as you can, and you can usually get some kind of a response.
I would say my biggest obstacle was not having enough time to get the clinical hours. I wanted to apply with well over 1,000 for PA school, and I got my CNA junior year and then started working, but I only worked like the minimum for PRN, and I didn't realize that that was not a good idea. So senior year, I worked 2 12-hour shifts a week, which was a lot being a full-time student. So I was just like very overwhelmed trying to get all the hours that I needed to get. So definitely I would try to get all your clinical hours evenly spaced out, so you're not like pushing everything last minute and trying to like jam in as many hours as possible.
My biggest obstacle was not choosing physician assistant first. I chose nursing first, and so I had to go through the whole major switch and then figure out prerequisites and school choices and things like that. So I think just choosing the major that you want first, I know it's hard. People don't really know what they want to do coming into college, so I think that was my biggest obstacle, like kind of playing catch up.
I think my biggest obstacle was kind of myself. I think going into like my freshman classes, I thought everyone, you know, my pre-med courses, who I knew was like on the pre-med track, was like sounded smarter than me. They looked smarter than me, and I really was like, I'm not capable of doing this. And so I feel like my biggest obstacle is just proving to myself that, you know, it doesn't really matter what you sound like or what you look like or even how smart you are. It's just about, you know, working hard and just never giving up.
Okay, so the third question, I really want to hone in on, especially for students that are just starting, but what sources or resources, and particularly ones that are at UNC Charlotte, did you find the most beneficial to help you throughout this process? If there were other resources like outside, that's great too, but any that are specific here and then outside resources that really helped you?
I would say Dr. Haney helped me a lot because my like regular advisor, he didn't really know much about like pre-PT or any of that stuff, but Dr. Haney knows a lot about pre-PT, pre-PA, pre-OT, all that stuff, and she like makes sure to email you opportunities and stuff. And another source was the Pre-Physical Therapy Club. They provide like emails for places that you can shadow and volunteer opportunities, so like that really helped. And just having an environment of other people who want to be PTs too is a really great connection.
Yeah, Dr. Haney was a big help for me as well with just like she can read your essays and Six and I did like an interview, mock interview kind of seminar with her, which was really helpful. And then I also used the Career Center to do some mock interview practice as well, which I found to be really helpful.
Shout out to Dr. Haney again. She is fantastic, and she would like read my personal statement, give me pointers, help me with my resume. She definitely gave me advice on like classes, which would look better on an application for PA school, and definitely that. I would say if you aren't on her list for emails, get on that, because that's how I got connected with all the organizations that I was a part of, and also volunteer opportunities like NC Med-Assist, which is an awesome opportunity that everyone should look at.
My biggest resource was the pre-PA club. Just having the community and people to ask questions and people that were going the same route as you. It was just a really big help to be able to lean on those people and figure out what you're doing.
Again, Dr. Haney is awesome. And then I met Miss Campbell at orientation, my freshman orientation. She kind of guided me through my whole freshman year, making sure I was on the right track. And then I would also say, I think being a chemistry major, the chemistry department was also like really helpful, which I didn't think they would be, but all the professors in the chemistry department have been really awesome.
Okay, is it on? No. Yeah. Yes. No. Okay. Go to the next one. So I had a different one planned for questions, but when I'm listening to all of this, it sounds super overwhelming. So I want to ask like a personal question with what did you do? Did you have like emotional support, or what did you do throughout undergrad to like get that support you needed when you felt really overwhelmed and like you couldn't make it through? If you can just give any tips or resources that you used.
For me, it was my mom, really, because I'm first gen, so she was really like pushing me, telling me like, échale ganas, like put work into it, that like you can do it. So she was a really big help. But also, I was a part of like the SAFE. My freshman year, I was part of like the SAFE program, and there you get like someone who's a year older than you, I believe, and like they're just like your friend, and they like help you with like your first year. So my person was Lauren Brown. We're in the same major. She also wants to do PT, so it was like nice to like have been paired up with someone who was already here at Charlotte for a year and who can like guide me through like campus and stuff.
I'd say I relied on my teammates a lot if I was going through like a hard time or just stressed out. So having my teammates on the cross country and track and field team were really helpful for me throughout college.
I live like an hour and a half away in Greensboro, is like where I'm from. So I always like would go home on the weekends to see my parents. And so that was like my stress-free time. And then also I like had a planner that is color-coded with like every meeting that I had that week, or when I was planning on volunteering versus when I was going to work, to like stay on top of things and not get too overwhelmed.
I was lucky enough to live with my best friends during college, and so just being able to come home and forget about school for a few hours and just, laugh and joke and, do things that you enjoy doing, that really helped me.
I have a very supportive mom. I call her every day. And then some really close friends who, if they knew if I was in the library the whole day, they're like, I don't think you've eaten, and they bring me food. And then also COVID was a really tough time for me personally, and I'm sure a lot of you. And that's when I did start going to like therapy for a little bit. And so I think that this is a really tough journey, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with, needing a little bit of additional help, just someone to talk to.
I think this works. Yes, can everyone hear? Okay. And so talking about a journey that you all have been on, is there anything that sticks out that you wish you would have known about sooner, and things that are coming to my mind, like I know you have to get references and things like that. Is there anything like, or the gap year or applying, is there anything that sticks out that you just wish, or what you majored in, right? Is there anything that sticks out that you just wish you knew a little bit sooner?
I would say that what I wished I knew sooner was that like if you email the admissions of the school that you like potentially want to go to, that they're extremely helpful. The PT I shadowed, he told me about it kind of like halfway, like towards the end of my like pre-career path, and he was like, just email Campbell like admissions and tell them like you're interested and they'll put you on a list. And I didn't know that, but because he told me, I emailed them and I got on this email list, and I was able to do like a summer program with them, got to do mock interviews and stuff like that. So like if you just email admissions with any questions or just to tell them that you're really interested in the school, it can like take you pretty far.
I guess one thing I wish I knew was that like some of the schools require like just extra little details on your applications. Like Western, ECU, and a couple other schools in North Carolina require like this kind of like social test where they look at like how you interact with other people, called like a Casper test. And that was something kind of at the last minute of me applying that I found out that I had to do. So I wish I would have known about that sooner.
Really realized that I needed a letter of recommendation from an actual professor, because I'm a type of person to just show up to class, get it, and leave. I don't normally like talk to a professor. So I would definitely recommend like fostering a relationship with a professor that you think that you can have a connection with and they can mentor you. And I did that senior year, so I was able to get someone in the exercise science program to write me one, but that was really stressful because I did not know that I had to get a professor to write me a letter of recommendation. I didn't want a stranger doing it for me because this is an important time.
Yeah, I was also going to mention the letters of recommendation. I feel like I kind of accidentally made really good like relationships with some of my professors, and like I had an interviewer at my last interview that I had be like, this is one of the best like letters of recommendations I've seen, and it happened to be like from a professor I was really close with and had his class. I was in his research group, and so I think that just kind of speaks to like how important like those letters of recommendation are. So like go to office hours, get involved like one-on-one professors, because those are really important.
I had a brain fart in between. I like couldn't think of the two things that I was thinking of. So, but now I got it. So my two are using my major. I feel like I was so focused on being a physician assistant that I didn't even think about using my own major. So not that I'm like stuck being a CNA right now, but it's not something that I planned in between my gap year or like had a backup plan for possibly not getting into school when I like the year that I applied. And so I feel like definitely if you get a job that you can use your major in the meantime while you're applying to these graduate programs, I think that'd be a big help. And also just like knowing about your program and what all it entails, because I was pre-nursing at first and I didn't find out about physician assistant until later. And so I feel like I kind of was on the back end of everything. So those two things were important.
Thank you for that perspective. All right, another question is, and we're talking a lot about the academic piece of applying, but when you're applying to these pre-professional schools, as you all know, it's like a total package. And so not only do you have to be super vigilant on your academics, but they also want you to be involved. So can you just speak to a little bit, like what did you do to stand out on your application, to get involved? How did that feel, and like what did you do to overcome maybe those fears like getting involved, because that's a lot as a first year student. So how did you progressively like get into and get more involved and make your application more robust?
So for me, my first year here was like peak COVID, so I couldn't really volunteer or anything. So there was like a year where I just didn't volunteer, but once I could start, I started volunteering like back at home with this church that I knew. I didn't get a lot of hours in, but I felt like because I tried during that time that they saw that like, oh, I actually care about like doing something for other people. And let's see, standing out. This semester I became a peer health educator, like a certified in peer health education. So I put that on my resume for the application and stuff. So I felt like that really helped because it shows that like I just don't care about other people, I also care about my peers.
Yeah, I'd say my standout quality is being a student athlete, because I do run cross country and track, so I compete the whole year compared to other sports, getting like one half of the year off. And then I also am a member of like the Student Athletic Advisory Committee, and now I'm a representative in that, just from being a member for the past couple of years. And I'm also part of the Exercise Science Society that we have as well. So those were kind of my things to be involved in.
As far as organizations, I was a part of many pre-health organizations, as well as I was on executive board of my sorority. And honestly, like whenever I got an email about like applying for a leadership program on campus or anything like that, I always applied, because even though it's like you don't really feel like doing this, you have other stuff like work-wise or schoolwork. I was part of the Women's Leadership Development Program, and that was the best program ever, and I learned so much from it. So just like taking everything email-wise and like saying, could this benefit me as an applicant, as a person? And then also volunteering with a nonprofit that I mentioned earlier, NC MedAssist. It helped with underserved communities in Charlotte, so that was really special. And I think that especially made me stand out because I volunteered there every week.
I had a couple of executive roles in pre-PA and global medical brigades, and so I feel like those really helped me come out of my shell as a college student and also just learn more about the medical field. Like I traveled to Greece and things like that, so I was able to put some of that on my application and just speak about like how I've learned just to be a better leader and a peer helper all around.
So I think I had a variety of kind of like different clinical experiences and different volunteer experiences kind of in and out of the medical field. But I think like the one thing that really stood out on my application, that was like the first thing all the interviewers like have asked me about was the club that I started here at UNC Charlotte. So again, you can start your own organization. So during COVID, volunteering was pretty like closed down. I didn't really have anywhere to volunteer, and I really wanted to get some volunteering hours. So I started my own club called Pals for Peds, where we write letters to children in hospitals and donate money to St. Jude's. And so I think that was like a pretty unique part of my application, that I like founded my own organization. It's like to watch it grow to like 90 members was really cool.
Thank you so much. And some of you have mentioned a few times like shadowing, clinical experience, things like that. Did you find that getting into that was difficult, and did any of you do things like, I know I've heard CNA, phlebotomy, anything like that to kind of help get your foot in the door? And do you have any advice for our incoming students?
For me, it was kind of difficult. You just have to like keep emailing and emailing places, and eventually they'll take you. I unfortunately only got to like shadow one type of setting, but I ended up getting like 200 hours in that setting, and I ended up getting to help a patient who only spoke Spanish, and I was the only person who could speak Spanish in the clinic. So that like enhanced my reason on why I wanted to do PT too. So just because you can't get all types of settings to shadow doesn't mean like you won't get into school either. So as long as you try, they'll like in the interview process they'll see.
Yeah, I was definitely very persistent because I was able to get into a hospital setting, which was really helpful. And luckily, my connections at the Atrium Hospital that I worked at helped me get an internship this spring to work in their children's hospital. So it's nice to kind of make those connections of kind of people in the Charlotte area. So I feel like once you kind of get your foot in the door to one place, it's easier to find other places when you can also show like another clinic that you have previous experience.
I recommend starting at your own doctors and asking to shadow, because that's how I shadowed with both of the PAs that I shadowed. They were at my doctor's office and then also my dermatology office. So I was able to shadow there, and that led me shadowing there. And now I work at the dermatology office as a medical assistant. So it's all about like the connections that you make when you're shadowing. And now that's what I'm doing until I go to PA school in August.
I agree. The connections that you make are really important. I did things like ask people at the gym, like, hey, what do you do? And then those connections gave me connections. Like I met a nurse practitioner at the gym, and she introduced me to her friend that was a PA. And so I feel like it's all about, who you're asking, who you're introducing yourself to, and then that can take you a long way.
I think mine might be kind of different. So I worked at I'm from a really small county, and over in my summers, I worked at like a really tiny little nursing home as a nursing assistant. And the family medicine doctor that would come in once a week there, I got to know him pretty well. And so I shadowed him, and he was actually in a band with some other doctors from some different specialties. So I got to go shadow some of his band members as well. So that was really cool.
And I know as an advisor, I get this question a lot, and I don't know if any of you have this experience. If you do, speak to it, or if you've had friends, but a lot of students are always asking, like, did you find that schools care where you took your science courses, whether that had been at a community college or a four-year institution? Did you have any issues kind of like with credits? If so, what were those?
For me, I think I took 2 classes that at a community college, and they don't care. It doesn't matter if you take it at a community college or a four-year institution. As long as the community college is an accredited community college, they'll take it. But I would also like make sure like you check every school that you like apply to and make sure that they do take it. But oftentimes they'll take it.
Yeah, I took all my science classes at Charlotte, and everything was perfectly fine as long as you like meet the requirements of what they have, because some are specific about what they take versus what they don't.
I took Chem 2 and the lab at a community college, and I started freaking out when I realized that a lot of the schools said on their website, like, we strongly disadvise that, taking anything at a community college, but I got into PA school, so it's I don't think it matters that much as long as you're not taking every single science course at a community college. I think it's just good to have a balance, and like if you need to take 1 or 2 courses at a community college, I think that's fine. I don't think that you're not going to get in just because you took a course at a community college. It's still the course.
Agreed. I have taken 1 science course at a community college, and I haven't heard anything about it. So.
Yes, and speaking with some schools, a lot of times they'll tell me as an advisor that when they're looking at transcripts and things like that, if they see that a student took, some intro courses at the community college, but then went to a four-year institution and did well in those upper-level science courses, obviously that looks strong. Or if a student didn't perform well in an intro science course but took an upper level one and then got an A, that kind of helps with the lower grade in that other science class. So that's just some feedback that I get as an advisor also. Okay, the next question, there was a lot of questions on the Google form about the interview process and like how to prepare. Even just presenting right here, I'm a little rusty, so it's got to be challenging to prepare for questions that you don't know what's going to be asked. How did you prepare and kind of build up your confidence to get through that process?
So before my first interview, I attended Dr. Haney's like little panel thing to like prepare you for different types of interviews, and it was super helpful. And another thing I did to prepare was I think I had a month until my interview. I took 30 minutes out of my day every day to really get to know myself, and I just answered like basic questions like why PT, little bit about yourself. And I feel like the interview at least for physical therapy is more about getting to know yourself and your values. So if you really know your core values and you know yourself really well, I feel like you will do good on your interview.
Yeah, I used Dr. Haney as well, which that was really helpful, just like kind of knowing some of the main questions. And then the Career Center was also really helpful because that was the first time that the question was introduced of like, what's a major current issue in like that physical therapists are seeing. And I've gotten that question a few times in interviews. So I'd say using both of those really helped. And then I think I've gained a lot of confidence with just speaking, just with interacting with patients throughout like shadowing hours. But I'll say practicing with a friend or like your parent is also really helpful as well to get feedback as well.
I would say when my first interview, I went in and I do not think I did that well, but I took that interview and helped it myself for the next ones. And basically for PA, there's a lot of scenario based interviews, like what would you do in this scenario that you can't really prepare for. So I got a bunch of index cards and I wrote scenarios on them, and my mom would like tell me the scenario and I would come up with the answer right on the spot. And every single question that they ask you in an interview, I usually always try to bring it back around to why I want to be a PA. I think bringing everything full circle is really important in an interview to like really bring home the purpose of why you're there and why you're the one versus the 20 other people in that room.
I think for my first interview, I didn't feel unprepared, but I was so nervous that I feel like I didn't show my best self. And so now I'm like going over questions and I'm like, okay, I know now how I could have answered that better. And I realized that like just being less nervous probably won't go away, but being better prepared will help me next time in the next interview.
So I would say I had a 1 week turnaround time from when I received my first invite and then my first interview. And I think, again, like, more practice is better. Like, I definitely think I've just finished my third interview and I definitely was a lot better in my third than I was my first. So I started out, I recorded myself answering questions. I answered questions with my mom, my friend, my boyfriend. I asked my professors that I was pretty close with to interview me, especially the one I'm most intimidated by. He took me to this big conference room and made me sit on the opposite side from him and just stared at me the whole time. And that was actually really helpful. And then again, Dr. Haney. And then I also signed up for a program called Medical Mentors, where I was like put with a current medical student, and we met a few times, and she asked me some practice interview questions and responded to me. Also, the Career Center offers the big interview program. So you can like do that online, and there's like a set of like pre-health questions that I did. So that's really useful to like get a question, then you can watch yourself back. And I think what really helped me, because you never know what they're going to ask you about, is just having a lot of different experiences that you're passionate about, because I really feel like, they know if you're not excited about something you did, and it really shows if you are excited about what you're doing and you're actually really passionate about what you're trying to do.
Did any of you ever use Toastmasters? I heard some students talking about that on a panel recently that supposedly helps with interview. Okay, just curious. All right, moving to the next question. Thank you for all of those insights. Very helpful. And just kind of now going to the interview process. We talked about the interview process, but now the application process. So what did you do to prepare yourself for that? It sounds like part of that was like letter of recommendations. And did you find that when you got those letters of recommendation, like, did you know about it like your sophomore year? Were you scrambling to kind of find those? And what other pieces helped in that application process?
So I started my application process like the end of June, beginning of July. Over this summer, I was taking Physics 1 and Physics 2, so I was kind of busy with Physics 1, a little stressed out about it. So once I got my A in Physics 1, I was like, okay, I can start the application process. I feel confident. So I took 1 hour every morning to just slowly do it, because it is a lot and you have to be very precise about it. So you don't want to make any mistakes or anything. So I just took an hour and I took it by slow. As for the letter of recommendations, I knew I needed them probably like early spring semester earlier this year. So I went ahead and just like started making a list of all the people I could potentially ask, and then I eventually asked them with time, because you have to give them time to write it, because they will forget about it and you do have to like remind them. But yeah, I just like took it by really slow, and like with the essays, I used the University Writing Center, and I would send a bunch of essays like twice a week. I like maximized my hours, but they were so helpful with that. So it made the application process a little easier.
Yeah, I knew kind of my like letters of recommendation of in the spring semester of who I wanted those to be, and I applied. I started in like mid-June, late June, because I was trying to finish the GRE first before I started my application, and then I kind of just broke it up into different sections on different days, and I found that like chunking it was really helpful. And then the essays do take a lot of time, so I would definitely say just make sure you give yourself enough time throughout the summer to do your application. But my biggest advice also would be to try and have your application up before school starts, because I just feel like once your senior year starts, if you like want to apply when you're a senior, it's just a lot easier to have your applications like sent out before school is started.
So the CASPA, which is how you apply to PA school, opened up this past April, in the 28th of April. So that whole week I was working on getting in like all the monotonous information of like where you're from and like what your high school was and all that kind of stuff. So I worked that week, and then they also, a lot of schools want supplemental applications, so you have to go like through their own school website and do that application, as well as some on CASPA have certain different questions that you have to answer for each particular school. So I kind of just worked on it a little bit every single day, and I probably took me an entire month to get everything done and squared away. As for letters of recommendation, I just asked my manager and then a PA I shadowed, as well as the professor I talked about earlier, but I plan those out earlier in the spring, trying to figure out like, are these the best people who can represent me from a different perspective? And then for my personal statement, I started in January because it's really tough to write an entire your life and your passion in, I think it was like 1,000 characters. So trying to plan that out and taking a little bit of time each day and having many drafts and sending it to Dr. Haney was really important, because just because it sounds good to you doesn't mean that it sounds good to somebody reading it, and getting feedback and working from there just to get an overall good application.
I started my application super early. So on the CASPA, you can look at it and kind of see what's required. It saves, some of the stuff saves and some of the stuff doesn't save. And so the year before I applied, I went on there and I was just looking at all the different tabs that were required to be filled out. And so that's how I knew how many letters of recommendation would be required, and how many characters I had for the essay. So things like that I just went ahead and looked at, so I'd be prepared for whenever it did open. So I was able to fill out some of those experiences and get my list of experiences and letters of recommendation. I kind of planned out my CASPA before CASPA opened, and I feel like that really helped me just because I wasn't scrambling for information. I had basically written down everything that I wanted to go in my application before filling it out, and so that gave me extra time to check back on it and really make sure that it was perfect before submitting.
I kind of knew who my letter writers were going to be at the end of the fall semester, so I was able to kind of give them a little bit of a heads up that, hey, I'll be asking for this like in the following summer. I would say one thing I thought going into this was that like your application had to be in like the day AMCAS and ACOMA's open. It does not need to be. I thought that being a little bit late would ruin my cycle, and it has not. But I would recommend starting on your personal statement more than 2 weeks before you wanted to submit it. That kind of really stressed me out. Additionally, something I wish I knew that I did kind of scramble for a little bit, I had an MD letter of recommendation that I got from one of the physicians that I shadowed, but I did apply MD and DO. DO schools really like for you to also have a letter of recommendation from a osteopathic physician. And luckily I'd already shadowed a couple of osteopathic physicians as well as allopathic, so I was able to get one from an osteopathic physician as well. So if you're planning to apply to both, just apply osteopathic or just apply allopathic, I think that's something you should probably make sure you have going into it.
Awesome. And Jenna, can you speak a little bit? When did you start preparing and studying for the MCAT?
The MCAT. I blocked it out. I started studying for the MCAT in December, right after the day after I took finals last year in December. I started studying for my MCAT, and I took it June 4th of this past spring. What I did for that, I got the Kaplan books, read all of them, read my biology book twice because I am a chemistry major and that was pretty tough for me. And then I did all of the questions that Kaplan offers and then all of the AAMC material. It went well for me, but I will say that I do feel like the length of time that I studied was a little bit longer than you need, and I think I would have done better having shortened the period of time as well as incorporating more things like Anki to kind of keep the information in my head for longer. So I would recommend not studying for as long and maybe not doing school while you're studying. Maybe just take it like a summer, take 3 months and like just do the MCAT. If I could go back, that's what I would do.
And I don't know if I know some of you took the GRE. Were there any other things that you did, or when did you start preparing for those exams? And not everyone has to speak on this, but if anyone wants to add anything, feel free.
I took the GRE twice, once last fall semester and then once again at the end of the spring semester this year. So the first time I was preparing for it, kind of not really studying for it. There's this app, it's called Mongoose. It's like GRE prep. So when I was like on the bus, I would like do that instead of like scroll through TikTok. And I would just take practice tests, the free ones that they offer. And then I had like personal stuff in my family happen. So I decided to go into the test barely studying just to see how the test was like. And then I ended up only getting like 2 points off of what I actually needed. So then I decided to just like focus a little more. And there's this YouTuber called Greg Matt who like really helped me to study for that. And then I ended up getting the score I needed. So that was my experience with it.
Yeah, I studied a little bit in the spring semester, but mainly like when school ended, I studied for a couple weeks, and then I took one in early June, and then I didn't get the score necessarily that I like needed, so then I took it again in like mid-July and studied before the second one, and then I got the score that I needed.
I took the GRE twice, once last December, and then I took it in March. In December, I did really good on the math portion of the GRE, but like on the English. So then I focused on the English and reading and grammar more for the March GRE because for PA schools, a lot of them super score. So I had the stronger math score from my December test and then the stronger English score from my March test.
If you're anything like me, you do not like standardized testing. So I did take the GRE twice. I didn't end up with the score that I necessarily wanted, my target score, but I did also look at schools that did not require the GRE, and so that was something that really helped me. I was like, I don't want a school to just accept me because of a standardized test or not accept me because of a standardized test. So there were a lot of PA programs that I looked at that did not require the GRE, and it's changing. I feel like a lot of schools are doing away with it, which makes me really happy because it wasn't something that I wanted to put on my application. So something to look at.
Thank you so much. I want to spend a few minutes because I know that I asked a lot of questions that you all reached out on the Google form, but I want to leave some time and flexibility if there's something that didn't get asked today that you all would like to know, and I'll just give a few minutes if anyone has any other questions for the panel. Yeah.
Hi, thank you for being here. I was just going to ask about research and if you have any suggestions for getting involved in that and how you would market that to these schools.
I did research. Unfortunately, it was pushed down because of COVID, but I did do research for the exercise science department. It was like an honors program that I did, and so I feel like depending on your major, most departments have the opportunity to do research, and I feel like it's a really good look on your application just because you get to do your own studies and things like that, and it just shows that you are going the extra mile to put yourself out there and be interested in something else other than your academics. So
yeah, I'm also doing research. I did research last year. I'm currently an honors research chemistry major, so in the lab all the time. I'm actually doing like physical chemistry research, which is not really related to medical school, but I think that's also like, it doesn't have to be something really closely related to what you want to do. And I think that that's also been like a good talking point in my interviews to like kind of explain a little bit about what I'm doing. But I definitely think research, if you don't love it, I don't think you necessarily need it. But if you think that's something you're interested in, it's a really cool thing to be able to talk about.
Do we have a question?
Oh.
Are there any more questions? Yeah.
Thanks. Maybe I'm a little bit off, like maybe Jada, you've taken a couple years off maybe, but I guess my question is what made you all decide to kind of apply like all the way through versus taking like a year or two to figure out and explore like as many opportunities as possible? I guess what was like the pros and cons, I would say, of like applying immediately versus maybe waiting?
So for me, I only applied to 2 schools and they both start in January of 2024. So I knew I would have that like 9-month gap from like graduation to when I started PT school. So taking a gap year probably would have put me further behind. Not really because I was graduating a year early, but like the goal was to just go straight into PT school since I know I would have such a big gap.
Yeah, I knew I kind of just wanted to go straight into PT school because it's 3 extra years anyways. So I was like, I just kind of want to get it done as quickly as possible. So that's I just kind of knew coming into college that I wanted to just apply. So that I didn't really stray away from that.
I basically was just like, I'm going to give it a go. I barely had the 1,000 hours and I had like 50 volunteer hours. So I was like, I'm just going to give it a go. I won't be too hurt if I don't get in. And then I was willing to have like that gap year if I didn't get in to make my application stronger and get more hours within everything.
I thought it was necessary for me to take a gap year because of the GRE. Like I wanted to take time, and I also retook a class during the summer that I took my gap year. So it was just a couple different things that fit just my schedule and planning. I had already, like in my paper that I wrote down my planning for PA school, a gap year was literally in it. It just was something that just fit my schedule, like taking the GRE, taking my time to study for it, working, saving up, and things like that. They just all added up to a gap year.
I think like the whole time I was in college, I was like, I want to apply like going into my senior year so I can just go straight in, but I was just kind of waiting to see if everything kind of lined up because I was also kind of in the same like line of thinking of like, if I don't get in this cycle, I can just take a gap year, make my application better and apply again. Luckily, I don't have to do that or take the MCAT ever again. But yeah, I kind of always just knew I wanted to go to medical school, and so it was kind of,
And to help like elaborate on some of this, being at a lot of conferences and as an advisor, and don't quote me on this percentage, but I believe we can ask Dr. Haney, but I believe it's like around 67% of students do take a gap year. And that is in order to get, to bring up their GPA or maybe do a post-bac program. It's to get more research done, more shadowing or clinical. So if you're sitting here like, oh my gosh, I'm not prepared, don't, medical school or these pre-professional schools are not going anywhere. Everyone's journey is different. So I think that's also really important. Your personal journey might be different in the way that you get there, but majority of students typically do take a gap year just because of all the pressures that are on you. To get some more experience and exposure. So just be kind to yourself. It's a very long process. And I think a lot of the takeaways from tonight and all of them speaking is really planning ahead. It sounds like that's a good tool. Utilizing your campus resources, whether that's the Amazing Career Center here. Dr. Haney is a huge advocate. She's an awesome support system. The Writing Center, your peers, you're going to need like a lot of help and emotional support. So kind of planning ahead for all of those things, it sounds like was really beneficial. And getting involved. Sounds like those are the main takeaways. I think we are pretty close to time. We may have time for one more question. But just know when you're leaving, we have Gary ordered pizza, so there's pizza out there for all of you to grab on the way out. We really appreciate everyone being here and all of our panelists for taking the time to be here to answer all these questions. And how are we on time, Gary? 5 minutes. Is there like one more question? Yeah. Oh, I'll let you. Okay.
Hi. So my question is just I see you guys have like a list of schools that you wanted to go to. So what was like the best way you kind of found the schools you wanted to go to, or like kind of determine, oh, like this one not for me, or this one's definitely for me?
For me, I made a pros and cons list for every school, and the only reason I applied to 2 schools was because I was graduating a year early, so I didn't get to like take Chem 2, so like that also like narrowed down my list. So my thinking process was just like, I'm gonna apply this year. If I get in, that's great. If I don't get in, then I'll take the gap year and I'll like do more prereqs, and then I'll just apply to more schools. But yeah, that's really why I only applied to 2.
I applied to 8. I did a lot of in-state. I did like a mix of applying to private schools in-state, but also public in-state as well, just for like the price. And then I applied to 2 out-of-state schools. I'm still waiting to hear back on those, but I just applied to those because they're good universities. So I figured, why not just apply to some out-of-state just to see if I get in.
I applied to, I think, like 11. I basically just applied anywhere that I had my prereqs match, and I did not want to take Orgo 2, so I did not apply anywhere that had Organic Chemistry 2 as a prereq. And I basically just looked at accredited programs for PA. I didn't do any provisional, which means like I aren't fully accredited within their program. So that was another thing that I looked for, was making sure that they were fully had everything that they need as a program and that they were accredited. And then I just looked at the surrounding states and picked some random ones that I thought my GRE scores were lining up with and my prereqs.
I personally wanted to be in North Carolina, so I applied to most schools in North Carolina outside of 2. Also, most of the schools didn't require the GRE, which is really important to me. I think that those were like the main 2.
I applied to 26 schools, which seems like a lot, but it's actually pretty close to like the average that most applicants apply to. I applied to MD and DO. I do really like the DO philosophy, but also some of the MD schools have some of the things that I'm interested in too. So I applied mostly on the East Coast because I don't want to be too far away. I looked at where I want to be living for the next 4 years. I also looked at board scores as well as match rates because I really want to be able to go somewhere where I'm able to do, I'm going to be well prepared to go into medicine, and I can also, match into any field and not feel restricted by like specialty difficulty to get into. And I think also I think I've learned a lot about like each of the schools when I go to the interview, so I think that's been pretty helpful.
Are we on time? Okay. So that concludes our health journey panel. And again, I just really appreciate everyone being here, and anyone that's on Zoom also attending that way. So just a big round of applause for everyone.
Thank you to our moderator, Bethany.